So how are the American Fur Company trading posts of the Upper Missouri, the Grand Pacific Hotel, President William McKinley, and Hollow Oranges connected? A special batch of citrus shrub, courtesy of the Sunkist Company. Actually, I'm fairly certain that wasn't a thing at all. But my bogus answer to episode number 1 actually is. Find out tonight while together we enjoy a special fur trade edition of Drinking Through History. Good evening, fellow history tipplers. I'm your host, Leif Halverson, being joined tonight by my friends and fellow fur trade historians Lisa Sandin and, of course, Mr. Carl Koster. And welcome to tonight's special fur trade edition episode. If you've got a beverage that you wish to enjoy during our history lesson, please feel free to do so. I myself have been enjoying, since we just finished up celebrating Oktoberfest, a joint effort between Hofbrau and Leinenkugel's. And it's actually a pretty good brew if you can get a hold of that. So go ahead and enjoy whatever beverage you wish to enjoy during the history lesson. Please feel free to do so. You're probably going to want to have something on hand to cleanse that palate, and probably a glass of water as we get closer to enjoying the drink that we're going to be building later. Now the formatting, as you're seeing here, is completely different than what we've done before. This is a joint effort tonight between me and Lisa and Carl as we bring you this. In fact, there's a special component, basically an eating through history component, that you don't get to enjoy, but you can if you want to later. And you'll be able to do that at your discretion. But super excited for this joint episode tonight. As we go about answering this question, we've actually got to go back a fair ways to get us to eventually where we're going to be headed in the 1870s. But we got to kick her back earlier in the 1800s, and part of the story even takes place in the 1700s as well. So we're going to start in what is the western part. It's not even part of the United States yet at this point. And eventually it is, and then once it is, things are taking place. But there's a strong fur trade connection to this. So Lisa, why don't you start us off specifically, the American Fur Company and what's taking place on the Upper Missouri specifically?
Sure thing. So 1828, Fort Union is established. It was established by the American Fur Company. And when they're founded, beaver are the dominant fur that Fort Union is going for. However, not too far after their founding in 1828, John Jacob Astor is already seeing a change in the market. He's seeing that silk hats are coming into vogue, and specifically they're using chopped silk fibers to replicate what the beaver felt looks like. Also, they're using a water rat called nutria out of South America. It's a cheaper, essentially, fur than the beaver are. They can get them cheaper. They're using transatlantic shipping lines to get them to England. So they're getting a cheaper fur than the beaver. He's already telling the American Fur Company posts on the Upper Missouri, stop trading so many beaver. Only take the best beaver you can get. Those are the only ones we're going to be able to sell down in St. Louis at auction. And that's 1832. The fort's basically just opened at that point. He's also saying start trading buffalo robes. But that doesn't mean that's the first time Fort Union started taking buffalo robes. It's 32. On the Upper Missouri, pre to Fort Union being built in 1828, robes are already a mainstay on the Upper Missouri. You've got competition posts to what will become the American Fur Company post. Stone Boswick and Company already have posts as early as the early 1820s. You've also got the Columbia Fur Company, which is important, of course, to Fort Union, because that is going to be absorbed into the American Fur Company,
right,
found the Upper Missouri, and essentially build Fort Union.
King of the Upper Missouri,
Kenneth Mackenzie creates the Upper Missouri, or creates the Columbia Fur Company, and is the one who really does build Fort Union and creates what we have today. They're already trading. And in fact, Chateau, when he realizes that buffalo robes are the thing, he wants to control the trade of buffalo robes, because this is John Jacob Astor we're talking about. And he's trying to buy up all the robes he can. The Columbia Fur Company in 1827 has about 25 of the 50,000 robes that are available in St. Louis. They own half of the available robes already.
Wow.
That's an incredible amount for this little upstart company. We can now understand a little more why Astor is so intent on getting either to buy out the American Fur Company or get them and essentially buy them out and have them work with him. They obviously knew what they were doing in the buffalo robe trade.
About 13 years later, on the beaver side of things, within specifically the rendezvous system of the fur trade, because the fur trade does not end in 1840, but the rendezvous system essentially is in 1840. So if they don't make a shift, the AFC they're not going to be able to keep up. It's not going to keep on going unless they make some kind of a change.
They've got to move over to buffalo robe. And a big thing too with switching over to buffalo robe is of those 50,000 robes that are in St. Louis, Astor at this point, and we're still in 1827 now, he's saying there's not enough market for all 50,000 robes. He's only seeing a market for about 30,000. He's talking to Pierre Chateau, who of course is the Chateau Company. They're running from St. Louis. He also has to get in business with them to really get in the upper Missouri. But he's telling them, we need to find a market for these robes. We need to start advertising these robes. We need to start, essentially, how are people going to buy these robes and why are they going to buy them? And there's a couple different ways they're going to do that. They're creating essentially a buffalo robe consciousness in America. You know, these are the warmest robes you can wear. Use these for your sleigh robes, use these for blankets, use these for coats. That's going to create essentially a market for the robes by 1840, which of course means then they're making money versus everyone being out of business when the beaver market really falls out and the bottom is gone.
So it's necessary for them to lay some groundwork so that when the time comes, they've got a market already established, people are buying it when that transition has to take place. So this is forecasting. This is like in our neck of the woods, eastern Montana, western North Dakota, grain markets is a huge thing. So it's kind of like that,
yes,
but it's with the fur trade itself.
Very much so. And it's no surprise Astor is thinking about all these things. He's America's first millionaire, not unsurprisingly. This is the kind of businessman he is. This is the kind of forethought he had in business and why he's able to do so much and be so successful. There's also another issue coming up that helps with all of this. Transportation networks are really changing. Being on the upper Missouri, as Fort Union was, it had access to the Missouri River. You can now ship these large bales of buffalo robes downriver economically. You can't overland these. These things are huge packs. There's only 10 robes to a bundle. They're about 100 pounds. These are huge things. Fort Union itself in even 1833 is already trading 40,000 buffalo robes, according to Prince Maximilian, one of the many travelers that come through Fort Union. That's somewhere around 4,000 packs of buffalo robes. You're not putting that overland. You're not able to do that unless you're putting them on a boat economically.
Right.
By the 1840s, you're already up to 67 to 60 or 70,000 buffalo robes. 1850s, you're up to 100,000. You need a transportation network. Fort Union has that, being on the upper Missouri.
And beyond all of that too, when you combine all of the trading posts and all the companies together, they're averaging there for a while 200,000 buffalo robes are being turned in by the Northern Plains Indians each year to all of those companies together. So their transportation is a key thing in what's going on there.
It's absolutely huge. Without transportation, you can't get them down market economically to make a profit when they go for auction at St. Louis.
So they've got to do this groundwork, getting this thought in mind of people. You know, these are quality robes. These are from the West. You know, buffalo is one of the warmest things that you can get. But they're using them for more than just that, right?
Yes.
They are.
So what other things are they using them for, Carl?
Well, we just talked about how the steamboats are so vital on bringing up all the things we trade for these buffalo, and of course getting the buffalo back down to St. Louis. And you know, steam is the big thing. I mean, steam engines are churning all over, especially over on the East Coast. So steam does also lead to a part, not just on steamboats, but a use for the buffalo in the fact of machine belting. A lot of the machine belting on the East Coast, running those giant looms and running those lathes,
right.
You know, they found out that the strength and the amount of stretch that you can get from buffalo was being superior to actually regular beef cattle that was being used. So machine belting, you know, we talked about clothing a little bit. We're at a time still with steam, but we're not yet to automobiles. So when it comes to transportation, which is always a big part of U.S. history, you know, we're looking at everything from wagons, and carriages, and sleighs, and there we go again. Now we're looking at sleigh robes, and carriage robes, lap robes. These are basically the car heater of the day.
Right.
Every car you buy today has a heater. Back then, you got a carriage or a sleigh, or you most likely have both. You need these carriage robes. So we're seeing carriage robes, sleigh robes, machine belting. We're seeing clothing, as mentioned, for the warmth. But there's still one more. I mean, there's numerous. I mean, we can go all the way into bones being used for fertilizer, but there's one more product of the buffalo that we're kind of missing. And since we're talking drinks and we're talking consumable here, we have to look at the buffalo tongue. That delicacy of the American West, the buffalo tongue. We see at Fort Union in 1851, we see records of Rudolph Kurtz, one of the great men who was here, talking about removing tongues from casks of salt, hanging them in his room and drying them, being told to cut 170 tongues out of some heads that were outside the post. We're seeing numbers as much as 10,000 tongues being shipped out of Fort Union. We're even seeing men at Fort Union being reprimanded for going out as paid hunters for the post and being reprimanded for not only bringing back the meat, but bringing back the meat without the tongue, and they were consuming the tongue as hunters, and they were being reprimanded. They said, you can hunt these things, but you bring back the tongues too. So the valuable, I mean, just the cost of a tongue at Fort Union, it's already double the price when it gets to St. Louis. And these are things we're looking at as a delicacy on the East Coast. So we see that in some of the finer restaurants and some of the finer menus that you can find online.
Right.
So one of the great resources for this is looking at menus during the time frame of Fort Union. You know, that time frame when tongues are being shipped out of this location. From 1828 to 1867, and one of the best resources for historians on that is actually the New York Public Library, which has one of the largest collections of online menus that you can go onto the computer and find. So they're looking at the amount of tongues being on menus in places, not just New York, but the New York Library collection of menus covers everywhere.
Right.
So you're looking at an explosion of buffalo on menus in the 1840s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and that's taking you all the way to about 1900, when of course by that time that is falling off menus.
I think things are starting to look pretty grim then at that point for the buffalo.
It is,
in general.
yeah. You start seeing those numbers really drop off the menus right after about 1890, you know, but you know, looking at the journals of Fort Union too, and you're seeing that process of drying them and salting them, and it's almost like it's not so much of a jerky, but as a meat cure is what they're doing, like aging. It's like aging beef is what they're doing. So it ties it all in. I mean, this use of buffalo and this primary use of using tongue.
So tonight we actually get to enjoy and try this. Now, based upon period recipe from the same time frame while this is taking place. This is within contemporary time of Kurz's time at Fort Union. You found out how they're doing this, and you try to replicate that, and we're going to enjoy that a couple different ways tonight. Of that tongue. So go ahead and describe the process for us.
To go with our cocktail tonight, we're gonna, you know, this, what the great find that I think we lucked out with was looking through those menus in the New York Library menu collection. We actually found a menu, you and I looking through those, that combined our drink on the show tonight with buffalo tongue, both being on the same menu. So here we're replicating this, so we might as well have this buffalo tongue. So looking at the journals of Fort Union and looking at Rudolph Kurtz in 1851, he is telling us how to prepare this tongue. So we took a tongue, we actually buried it in a cask of salt for several days. That was removed, it was hung, it was dried for 3 weeks, and basically became quite dried and hard and discolored. But because we kept the check of the temperature, it never molded. It was just aging. So it's fine aged meat. And then since this was 1851, the way Kurtz told us to procure this, the other thing we were lucky enough with was finding an 1857 cookbook by a woman named Anne-Marie Collins. And that's a source which is also as great as the New York Library menu source. This was coming through Michigan State University's Feeding America website, which is basically an online website of all the cookbooks in North America.
And it's an absolute treasure trove.
It's a treasure
If
trove.
you're looking for historic cooking, check out this place.
Yeah,
It's pretty
Michigan
amazing.
State University's Feeding America. So there we found an 1850 cookbook. It was actually called the Great Western Cookbook. It was basically receipts for those moving into the West. And she tells us how to cook this dry tongue. And we followed her 1857 recipe, Mrs. Collins. We took that tongue and we soaked it for several days, trying to reconstitute this dry tongue. We then boiled it for 4 hours in the spices that she recommended, which was the basic salt, pepper, and bay leaf and water liquor that we made up. And we boiled this tongue for 4 hours. Once this tongue was done, after the several days of soaking and the 4 hours of boiling, we're preparing it two ways for tonight, and the two most popular ways. One was to serve cold as hors d'oeuvres, which shows up on the menu.
Right.
So we will have some cold sliced tongue. But then we also found another recipe dating also to the 1850s, where it was served as a main course, sliced thin, and basically fried and served on a plate. And that's delightful. So we'll cook the tongue. It's already cooked. We'll serve it two different ways tonight.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll do that next. We're going to enjoy a little bit of buffalo tongue. So inspired by and based upon what we've seen on these different menus, and we've actually got print-offs right here that we've been looking at. Here, Carl, you've prepared two different ways, and we've got to say a great big thank you for helping sponsor this episode. Tom and Chris Baxter for donating the tongue to us,
Yes.
that you were able to take through the curing process, and we learned a lot, and it's getting used for some special stuff later on that maybe will get brought up in later on episodes, but
Yeah.
really excited to see what the finished product's going to be like.
Yeah.
From the photographs that were able to be taken for the special project.
Yeah, weeks of work, and we're gonna still keep be a gift that'll keep on continuing. hopefully.
Right.
Yes.
So how about you go and explain how you've got it prepared for us, Carl?
So the two most popular ways we see tongue being consumed in that second half of that 19th century, we're seeing it sliced a lot of times cold, stored in the icebox or just stored off to the side, sliced cold for sandwiches, sliced cold, and that's when you're seeing in these menus, you're seeing it served as an hors d'oeuvre. You're seeing it in that layer of these menus coming out, or that layer of these special meals. So here we do have some buffalo tongue that's just been boiled, it's been sliced, it's served on some crackers with a little bit of cheese, just as an hors d'oeuvre. On the other hand here, much more tender now, we have the tongue that's been boiled, but it's been sliced very thin, and this has been warmed in a skillet with a little bit of butter and garlic, and this is going to be served alongside any of the side dishes that you'll see in the menu, but a dish of braised or a dish of fried buffalo tongue. And most of the time when you see buffalo tongue, you see people roasting it quite often, especially in the reenacting world,
Right.
where people are roasting. But a dried tongue coming out of a cask and being shipped, 1,000 miles across, doesn't lend itself to that
Right.
as much as a fresh tongue does. So since all these tongues we're talking about are the ones coming out of the fur trade and being shipped, these are going to be the two ways of the way people out east are going to be consuming these tongues. So the more tender tongue being fried in the skillet, and then of course the cold tongue in sandwiches
Right.
or hors d'oeuvres.
So coming straight from things like the Grand Pacific Hotel, from their menus, which is part of what we've used for the research on this. This is straight from that.
Yeah, the Grand Pacific Hotel was a big one. Another one that we see was a large fraternal organization of patriotic citizens in Washington, D.C. had a fancy dinner for many years in the 19th century, and their menu always included, it seemed, maybe it had to do with the patriotic of the growing United States, of seeing buffalo tongue on the recipe.
And we saw copies of 2 sequential back-to-back years where I don't remember what but it was in the like 20s or 30s annual of this wild game feed dinner that they're doing that it's featured on.
Yeah. So it's you hear it called the delicacy, the great delicacy of the West, and when you try it, it's not fatty. It's very lean. It doesn't have as strong as that of the taste that you get when people are eating livers or kidneys or heart. It still has the game, but it doesn't have that more irony or livery taste to it. It is a fine cut of meat. It really is.
So we're going to enjoy it 2 different ways as an hors d'oeuvre, and part of as it would have been for part of a main course as well on the menu. Okay.
All right.
So let's start with the hors d'oeuvres then.
All right. So
Lisa's freaking out right now because Lisa's very specific when it comes to food.
Mm-hmm.
Like
I'm
we've
gonna
reached
take the littlest piece.
you find cold tongue sandwiches still continuing in popularity, 1920s, 1930s. It's unusual for my grandparents to mention eating cold tongue sandwiches.
It's not terrible.
And I wouldn't call it tough by no means.
No, it's very soft.
very tender.
Mm-hmm.
For something that was dried in a cask of salt and then dried for weeks and getting lighter and lighter. We've almost lost a complete pound on the whole weight of the tongue in these 3 weeks.
I'm gonna snag another.
Yeah, we almost. I would say
it's appetizers.
I would estimate that about 40% of the weight of that tongue, anywhere from about 30 to 40%, is what we lost in this drying process. And that's not putting it in a barrel and shipping it for weeks and weeks and weeks, which would probably even drop it more. You would think something dried like that's lost 40% of its weight was going to be tough or stringy or but I think this soaking of the tongue,
Right.
and I think this boiling of the tongue for 4 hours, I think it brings it all right back. It's almost like one of those small sponges that when you get water to them, they open back up.
Not that this is spongy, because it's not. It's not at all the texture.
No, it came back to the freshly tendered meat, almost as if it was a tongue that was butchered just yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
So that curing process developed during that fur trade of how they were curing these tongues. I think it still works today.
Talking about the transportation aspect of this, you got curs cutting all these out, you salting them, they go back and forth between the kegs a couple times, where then they wait, right?
Right.
Springtime, June or so, you got the annual steamboat that's coming. I'm assuming that some of these may or may not be going back on the Mackinac boats that are floating downstream from the different AFC posts before the river freezes up. You're talking, it could be several months before these actually leave the upper Missouri outfit area of the AFC and eventually make their way to St. Louis. And tasting this, you'd had no idea at all that this had been a salt-cured tongue that was prepared. You'd have no idea at all. No idea at all.
I think it's very much akin to like some of those East Coast, down South Virginia, the hams and stuff like that you see. These cured hams that you need to do that soaking to remove some of that salt. Because I also don't find this overly salty either for the time it's spent. I mean, totally submerged inside salt. I mean, the salt, it was basically covering the whole, it was buried in salt for several days.
Right.
Which leached a lot of the water out as well. But like I said, I'm just amazed at the tenderness of it after drying. and losing 40% of its weight.
As you probably noticed on some of the images that went by the screen, you notice that this was a two-toned tongue. It had a darker coloring and a lighter coloring. And after it was done, the soaking and then the boiling process where the rind or the taste bud portion,
Right.
the outside part is removed, that coloring doesn't go down through that.
It's just on the cover,
a uniform color after you remove the top, after it's been reconstituted
Yeah,
and
and
boiled and everything.
you'll see tongues that are pure, that have no coloring, and then you'll see some that are pure black from tip to tip. So that all varies. It varies, per buffalo. That you're going to see it. So they do have a variation and size. I mean, a lot of times you're going to be looking at maybe a 2 or a 3 pound tongue. That's what you're going to see starting with. But as mentioned, even the journals and the accounts of these will say to soak them for 2 to 3 days, and that's just a general curing process with meat too. That I think today, even that most people that cure meat suggest about a good 30-35% loss in weight on the final product. So.
And just visually looking at these as well too, like if you hadn't told anyone that this was tongue that's on these crackers, like if you were to, using our 21st century lenses, looking at stuff, not geeking out on like what we do as historians, I don't think anyone would even question what they're just, you see it dark and you think beef or something like that on top of the, it's just meat, cheese, and crackers, like what you might have when you got friends over type of a thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's very approachable. There's nothing off-putting about it whatsoever.
A comparison to roast beef.
Yep.
Yeah.
Very much.
So let's dig into
Go to the hot.
Yes,
It's not really a small one, so just.
There's a bigger one there that I'm probably going to try to snag later. So this is what would be part of the main course along with the veg or whatever else that was on there. Hot and sliced thin.
You can definitely taste the garlic on this. Like it picks up the flavors you cook it in very well. It doesn't have an overwhelming outside flavor
Right.
or intensely tongue flavor.
Describe how you prepared this one again for us, Carl.
So that was boiled for 4 hours, and then was sliced, and then they would just throw it in the skillet and warm it. So in the skillet on this one, I just threw in a little bit of butter, a little bit of garlic and salt and pepper, and that was it. That's all I did. Now the boiling process, going through that Anne Marie Collins cookbook, it did call for onion and bay leaf in that water that boiled for 4 hours. So there was a little bit of already flavor into the tongue.
It's being imparted to it.
But this is nothing but a little bit of butter and a little bit of garlic just to warm the very thin pieces of the tongue. Because this is the same tongue as the dried tongue here, the cold tongue on the hors d'oeuvres. It was the same 4-hour boil. But here we're just trying to warm this up. But I think it not only warms it up, I think it makes it softer as well.
Yeah.
Obviously with the thinner cut, but
It has a nice crisp to it too, though.
On
Like
the outside edges. Yeah. This really takes me back to my childhood so our farm's in Wild Rose, North Dakota, and we'd go there in the morning. It's a 2-hour drive from Sydney to get there. And my brother Cedric and Hans and I would be helping out, come back with our father, Tom, with our grandfather, Oscar, and would stop in Williston at my grandparents' house. And it might be, some nights it's 10, some nights it's 1:30 in the morning, and my grandmother had food hot, ready to go for us. And my grandmother was an amazing cook. Her name was Faye. This reminds me of the evenings where she would have pot roast prepared for us. This is a very good flavor. The texture is very good on this as well too. This reminds me of those meals and not that I'm remembering it weird because I was like 8 years old and it's 1:30 in the morning having supper, but this takes me right back to that time frame in my childhood.
it has a home cooked,
Yes.
we're talking delicacies, but I'm thinking, maybe it's just the Midwest upbringing in me, but I'm thinking where's the potatoes and the carrots?
Yes.
And can I get a little gravy on that? You know,
Yep.
you know.
Maybe a Sunday afternoon
Yeah,
meal that you sit
right,
down with your family
right.
type of a thing.
Yeah.
So this, and we see this take place with all kinds of things, food, fashion, drink. To begin with, what exactly is the type of demographic, so to speak, that they're actually marketing these at, the type of people that are marketing for during that time frame?
Yeah, it's for the wealthy. I mean, they're not. It's expensive. It was expensive. I mean, to the point where we mentioned that there are hunters employed by the fur post being reprimanded for consuming the tongues after the kill. They want the tongue after the kill, and they have their choice of any cut of that meat, and they're going for that tongue, and they're being reprimanded for going for that tongue because the company knows there's a profit in that.
Right.
So the company knows it's profitable. The company knows it's worth some money, and you need money to afford this. So it's going. I mean, looking at the menus that we uncovered, these are some pretty hoity-toity organizations here.
Right.
This isn't being served at a mom and pop diner. I mean, these menus we're looking at, these are some fancy fancy hotels, right. Places that have been classically known, like Delmonico's in New York was mentioned as one of the great places to obtain a buffalo tongue meal back in the day.
Right.
So you're not. Which is
pretty incredible.
Yeah, you're going to find this at the finer places, and it's considered a delicacy back then. And for a while, I think in history, it doesn't become the delicacy; it becomes the leftover meat.
Right.
So, but it's
fun.
You
see kind of a switchwiroo that takes place, really.
Right. But it's fun to revisit it as a delicacy.
Right.
I think.
Which ties into with what we're doing in today's episode. With that, we see that take place with tonight's beverage as well. It's being it was the upper crust people attending these formal occasions, and then time kind of changes, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But if you ever get the chance to try it this way, please do so. It is not off-putting whatsoever. The flavor is very good. I would describe it as, it definitely takes on the flavor of what you're cooking it in, but it is a very mild flavor. There's not a gaminess aspect to it. When we think of wild game, right. Venison, things like that, sometimes we think of gaminess. Gaminess isn't even a word that I would use to describe the flavor.
I think some people would be fearful of texture too, because it is a tongue.
Right.
And I don't think that's not a thought when you're consuming. It doesn't have that. Is it going to be like a gizzard? Is it going to be chewy, or is it going to be like a liver? Or I think sometimes people are going to be maybe off by what this texture might be, and I think that's
right.
I don't think there is an off texture on this.
And for some folks like you and I, we're like historic food, bring it on type of a thing. Lisa, not so much. You are incredibly particular. I'm not going to say picky, but particular.
That's a good word.
About the way that you do stuff. You had some apprehensions. Mm-hmm. This was her idea, by the way, that we do this. And
I don't know why.
She's like, "Why did I come up with this idea for us to try to do this?" What were the things that you were concerned about before you got to try this tonight?
So my biggest fear was a lot of texture, because a tongue has such a weird exterior texture. And I had no idea how it was going to be cooked or prepared until I talked to Carl about it extensively. And the idea of being peeled was just unappealing. Let's just be real. That just seemed really not pleasant. But honestly, to eat it eats like a piece of pot roast. It's got a similar texture. It's not quite as veiny. It doesn't have the fat marbling in it. But it's really similar to a really well-cooked pot roast. It's not off-putting. The flavor is really good. I'm probably not going to have another piece. I'm probably not going to try a whole lot more.
That's okay. I'd eat whatever you want.
But honestly, it's pretty good.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm actually surprised at how much I did enjoy it. I liked the warm better than the cold. I thought this just had a better flavor with that garlic put in it, and I loved the texture you got on the edges with the frying of it.
Yeah.
I can see how it would be a delicacy. It'd be something special, something different you could get something of the American West too. There's already that mythos happening when these menus are being printed.
Right.
I can understand that in a historical sense. And I think too, you could do this with any kind of tongue, honestly. It doesn't have to be a buffalo tongue. So if people at home wanted to try it, get whatever tongue is available to you.
Get your tongue on some tongue.
Right, exactly. But this is something too, a lot of our friends in the history community, year-round, we've got different types of events that we do, get-togethers and things like that. Our friends in the Fort Union Muzzleloaders Association, each year in December, we've got this event called Engagé's Christmas. Sometimes nicknamed High Table as well, because of the high table within the bourgeois house, where those the upper level clerks and everything got to sit down with the bourgeois or post manager. Something like this would be very appropriate for something like that. So history friends, here we are in October and we're getting closer to those types of things. If you get the opportunity, I would really encourage you to do this as something special, that historic context to share with fellow historians within events type like that. I think you'll enjoy it a lot. So if you get the opportunity, definitely try to use this. Now a quick disclaimer, whatever methodology you choose to do, follow that. Drinking through history is not responsible for the results that you would have with this. Use your judgment. You're making the decision for yourself. We just do crazy stuff like this, so that's one thing. So if you decide to take this on, whether you have someone do it for you, or you decide to do it yourself, it's a risk that you're taking, just like everything in life, and it's important that you understand that. But we've been able to link now American Fur Company Trading Post, the Upper Missouri, and the Grand Pacific Hotel. They are serving this, and we're on the verge now of connecting President McKinley and Hollow Oranges together. And it goes back to those menus again. That's going to lead us to tonight's drink. What was one of those very common drinks, Carl, that we see on those menus that's being served in these upper crust type of things along with the buffalo tongue?
When you're looking at these menus, and we were looking for buffalo tongue, we found it. But then, of course, what else are they serving with the tongue? And they're on the bottom of more than one. It was actually two that I've seen so far, and I'm sure there's more. But the one we were looking at that had the buffalo tongue mentioned that also served at this fancy regale was a cocktail known as Roman Punch.
Roman Punch. And punches have been around for an incredibly long time.
They have been.
Especially if you're familiar with, I've talked about Wondrich's books. Two of the ones that I use quite a bit is Imbibe for a number of the historic drinks that I reference and will try to replicate for us. But he's got one specifically on punches as well. And you think of, there's a punch bowl, and the punch is inside, and it's made en masse to be shared with people, and this is one of those. But this one's got a little bit of a twist to it, just as far as how it was functioning. It wasn't just an alcoholic beverage for people to enjoy. It's serving actually two different purposes, the Roman Punch. Since it's got the citrus in it, it's supposed to be a digestive aid. You're going to be enjoying this beverage about midway through the meal, oftentimes. So it might be after we've had our hors d'oeuvre version of the buffalo tongue, but you're going to eat this or enjoy the Roman Punch right before you're going to go into the main meat course. So you might have this after you have the buffalo tongue hors d'oeuvres, or you might have it right before you've got the main course, our thinly sliced and heated fried version that we've got right here. So the citrus was being used in such a fashion to help with the digestive things, prepare you for that next meal, but also as a methodology of cleansing the palate before you go on to the next meal, which makes a lot of sense, to be enjoying it in that type of a situation. This is one of those beverages that definitely changed over time, and we're going to be using it Later on in the time frame, again, this is for these upper crust type of a thing, so that fancier type of a situation, this is going to be used. And oftentimes this is being done in a bit of a sorbet type fashion. And we think of sherbet because it's not sherbet, there's no R in that second syllable. So stop saying sherbet. Sorbet, it's similar to that sherbet, partially frozen, kind of a slushy type of a thing where it's all made together. Sometimes it's got a meringue component that would go on top, which is the way that we're going to be doing it tonight. We wonder why the heck is this thing called Roman punch? Where does that come from? And I've done a lot of searching. I'm not sure what else that you've come across, Carl. I've come across a reference to this, and this is coming from 1842, but he's referencing back from the 1700s as well about this Roman punch, one of these earlier versions of it. This comes from...
Is this where I slip in Buffalo Rome?
You could.
Yeah.
Potentially. Potentially we could do that. Maybe we'll have that playing in the background while we're reading this junk. So this comes from Epicure's Almanac, or Diary of Good Living by B.E. Hill, and this is 1842. And he's talking about this. This is one of the references that we have. There's really not a whole lot of references that lead us to why it's called Roman punch, but this is what he leaves for us from his Diary of Good Living, or Epicure's Almanac, from 1842. He says, the history of punch a la Romaine, or Roman punch, is somewhat curious and deserves mention. It has been for nearly a century the summer refreshment of successive popes, and their cooks were threatened with horrors of holy office if they ventured to impart the secret of its preparation. In other words, these cooks, for whomever the current pope was within the Roman Catholic Church, guys, if you divulge this recipe, you're going to become a monk. You are going to be put into some kind of holy order if you divulge this thing. We see this being done, as he talks about here, a summer refreshment. So that sorbet aspect makes a lot of sense, but we see it taking place in the winter part as well. He goes on to say as far as how it potentially gets spread so that other folks, eventually the common folk as well. The invasion of Italy by Napoleon in 1796 served to break through this terrible interdict. A young man named Molus, son to the chief confectioner of Pius VI, Pius, of course, being one of being the Pope at that time, no sooner saw the tree of liberty planted in the Eternal City than he ran away from his father, leaving the patapans and jelly bags of the Vatican to their fate. It's kind of an interesting jab, jelly bags. We need to bring that one back and comment. That guy, he's such a jelly bag. And united his fortunes with those of the conqueror. Young Master Molus became favorite servant of the ill-starred Josephine. When she died, he obtained a situation in the culinary establishment of the Russian Prince Levin and accompanied His Excellency to London on his appointment as ambassador to our court. The signer was the first to introduce the papal delicacy in London, and the guests who partook of it at the prince's table were thrown into ecstasies. They all raved that they loved this beverage. The recipe was sent to Carlton House in compliance with the wish of Prince Regent, and His Royal Highness permitted copies to be given to a select few of those he honored with his friendship. By degrees it became better known, and I remember about 7 years ago a pastry cook's shop in the Quadrant where this delicious but insidious punch was to be eaten in perfection. How so insidious? Well, he's got this quote here from this French gal. He says, a French lady once enjoying some such ice, so this is being served in its sorbet fashion, is said to have exclaimed, "What a pity that this pleasure is not sin." And he goes on to say, "Taste and morality, so Parisian, can neither need nor merit a comment." So when we think of Roman punch, like papal punch or pulp, as it Roman Catholicism, Roman punch, fellow theology and history nerds, you can kind of see where that's potentially tracking there. So because of Molus here, potentially is the reason why this eventually ends up where it is, being guarded for as long as what it was, and then he
Right.
shares it, and then, you know, the guy that he's serving, this Prussian guy, it's okay that we're going to share this with these people in London, and then it kind of takes off after that. So that's potentially, you know, where the name Roman punch comes from in regards to that.
Popes, princes, we're getting some highfalutin territory.
Right.
So it makes sense if it falls in with the tongue as the delicacy.
The version that we are going to be using tonight appeared from the New York Times in 1879. There's a cookbook that it appears in 1891 as well. It's the same recipe, and we see historically there's some other changes that we'll talk about in a minute, but this is supposed to make drinks for 6 to 8 people, and this is how it's put together. 2 cups of lemonade, the juice of 2 oranges, 8 ounces champagne, 8 ounces of rum. This should be a good Jamaican rum. Don't use anything less, please, than Appleton Estates rum. Sometimes it's called reserve, whatever their base model rum is. Don't use anything less than that, please. And then there's a meringue component that gets used as well, where we're going to take 2 large egg whites, a few drops of lemon juice. That acidity is just going to help make things work together. And this may, if you've never done anything like this before, this may seem a staggering number, 3 cups of confectioners sugar. And when you go to make that, I've tried to make this in a bowl using a whisk, and you've got to, you know, to quote Bob Ross, that's the guy. You've got to beat the devil out of it to get it stiff enough and airy enough. So please do yourself a favor, throw it in an electric mixer. That's how we've prepared it tonight. So you've got, once you're going to stir together the lemonade, the orange juice, the champagne, and the rum in the punch bowl, and then you're going to chill it. You're going to go ahead and put it in the fridge, and then right before you're ready to enjoy it like we are tonight, then you're going to go ahead and you're going to make that meringue. When you're ready to make it, you're going to whip up those eggs and the lemon juice in a medium bowl until they hold soft peaks, and this is the best explanation I've got. Thank you to my wife Kim for explaining this to me, because I'm a guy and don't always understand some of these things. When we are talking about soft peaks, think about soft serve ice cream, right? So whether it's at whatever place that you're going to that's got soft serve ice cream, the ones that actually pay attention to the detail, they do the bloop 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 thing, and then they do that little swirl where you've got that peak at the top and then it drops down in loops. That's what we're looking for, versus stiff peaks where you can pull that up and it just kind of stays pointing up. The soft peaks are going to go up and then go down like what you would on the top of soft serve ice cream. So that's what you're looking for. If you don't have that, you don't have a good consistency. Your meringue is going to be stiffer than what it should be, which was the problem that I had when I first put this together. So that's what you're looking for. And then you're supposed to pile it into a serving bowl. Then when we go to enjoy it, so this is a non-sorbet version of this. You're gonna fill punch cups with ice, ladle the punch over the top, and then top each with a dollop of that meringue, and serve with cocktail stirrers. And the reason why, the way I'm figuring, is you want to mix that meringue in, the melding of that sweetness from the meringue in with the rest of the drink. We're going to be using spoons tonight because that's the way that we're rolling. Because I don't have punch glasses, we've got the double old-fashioned glasses. So we'll be seeing that in a little bit. Now, you know, we've got I've told you, the rum in this, use a good Jamaican rum. Don't use anything less quality than that Appleton Estate Reserve rum, which is like aged 3 to 5 years or whatever. Don't use anything less than that. Now champagne though, like so many other things, like what we have seen with the buffalo tongue and stuff, that was a thing that changed over time as well. You know, the kind of the industry standard now is that brut style of champagne. But that wasn't the way that it always was. In fact, the champagne makers at the time, depending on which countries they're shipping it to, kind of determined the amount of sugar that they would actually have to use on the inside of it, going from the driest country, dry as far as sugar content, not alcohol type of a thing. Not surprisingly, in England they prefer the driest style, that they're only using 22 to 26 grams of sugar. The United States, we come in second with 110 to 165 grams. Germany as well. France is at 165. Scandinavia is at 200. But the Russians they preferred the sweetest, but keep in mind what's going on in Russia at the time, and I'm not going to fault them for wanting to have some freaking sugar with all the crap they were going through. 250 to 330 grams of sugar. So the Russians preferred the sweetest, champagne at the time. Tonight we did not use a Brut. We're actually using a Spumante in there. It's not on the full end. It's not like a Moscato or anything like that, but it's got a decent amount of sugar, a decent amount of sweetness, which I think is going to be closer to the way that we're making it tonight. So the hollowed out orange that we talked about was used in the presentation style of this. This would have been in its sorbet form, probably with the meringue mixed in because it was going to be solid enough. And this comes from the 1907 Steward's Handbook that says Roman punch was served in oranges hanging on the natural trees, the pulp of the fruit having been deftly removed, so I think black magic and sorcery, so that the favored guests would pick their own. So one of the ways that they were doing this, turn of the century, 1907, you got these oranges hanging on the trees where they've somehow made an incision, removed the stuff, and they've filled it with Roman punch. And these guests could go over and pick their Roman punch right off the tree, open it up, and enjoy the sorbet version of this. So this is within that hoity-toityness type of a thing. So they're using ice. We do see where sometimes instead of ice, if snow is available, they're actually using snow as part of the mixture to help create that sorbet aspect as well. So it was a very popular beverage for quite some time, along with our high fare here of the buffalo tongue. But like so many other things, it changes over time, just like the champagne changed in there. It go from sweeter to drier as time goes on. We see where we get into the 1920s, and the Roman punch has not looked as good enough for those of us enjoying these high situations type of a thing. 1922, Emily Post, in a thing that she had written, she declared it to be, quote, unknown except at public dinners or in the dining room of parvenu. Okay, so us common folks are starting to enjoy it, right? It's going out of style type of a thing. So the version that we're going to be enjoying here in just a moment, this is from New York Times one in 1879. Sometimes in a similar fashion to this, along with the 8 ounces of champagne and the 8 ounces of rum, we see the addition of orange curacao and maraschino liqueur. And sometimes the champagne is out altogether, but in its place we've got the orange curacao and the maraschino liqueur. But that's not the one we're doing. We're doing the one from 1879, Roman Times. In 1897, it's served for the inaugural ball for President William McKinley. I had another president who used this as well, President Hayes. His wife, who was a bit of a temperance movement person and actually moved after they had a bit of a party that went crazy when a couple of princes was there one time, and she's like, look, we got to tone this down. Like, you're the president. We got to make the White House a dry campus type of a thing. Lemonade Lucy became her moniker because this has got lemonade in it. It's probably one of the reasons why it became popular there. According to legend and lore, the President Hayes had ordered that rum essence was supposed to be used in it, so it would be all right. But in theory, potentially, one of the stewards in the kitchen was like, screw it, we're putting rum in it, type of a thing. So who knows? So we've got it all connected now. Let's go ahead and let's enjoy some Roman punch.
I look forward to it.
So here we have our Roman punch. We've got the punch prepared that's been chilled after it was done being made, and like as we talked about, right before you're about to enjoy it, we're going to make the meringue up. Once it gets all whipped up, we're going to put that in a second bowl. Please do yourself a favor and use an electric mixer, otherwise you're going to have to beat the devil out of it. I spent 20 minutes as I was going through making a practice run of this, and you're just going to wear yourself out, and it's not going to be right. Just use the electric mixer when you make that meringue. So just a quick recap of that. In here we've got 2 cups of lemonade, the juice of 2 oranges, and if you saw me just use the Hulk smash method, don't do that. Use a juicer when you do that. It works out better. Otherwise, you're gonna have to take a strainer to get all of the extra pulp and the seeds out. 8 ounces of champagne. We went with a spumante. If you want to go later on in the time period, you can use a brut. It's going to be less sweet when you do that. 8 ounces of rum, and that should be a decent Jamaican rum. Bare minimum, that should be that Appleton Estate. And many thanks to Lisa for helping sponsor that part of the program tonight. 2 large, when it comes to the meringue, we're using 2 large egg whites, a few drops of lemon juice, and you're going to whip that up till you got soft peaks where it's got that soft serve ice cream thing where it curls over on the top. Then you're going to start mixing in your confectioner's sugar, 3 cups worth. And so here we are now where we get to enjoy. And according to the instructions, we put ice in the punch glasses. We don't have punch glasses. We've got the double rocks glasses tonight. We've got the ice in already. So let's go ahead and serve it up. Now this does have pulp in it. And depending on where you were, you would probably have pulp in yours as well. Sometimes they were adding in additional lemon essence. Some of the recipes showed that taking place. Getting it all over the glasses, which is just awesome, but that's all right. And of course, if you're doing this in punch glasses, this should take care of the 6 to 8 people that they say it's supposed to be. So now we'll go and we'll top our meringue on top. And to an extent, a little meringue will go a long way, but these are like, I don't know, double, triple, quadruple portions going on here, so that's all right. So we're gonna end up with a little bit more meringue on top. Just a little bit more. And this, based upon this recipe, is going to be served with a cocktail stirrer, cocktail stick. We've got spoons tonight that we're using. Go ahead, guys, and take a sip first before you mix it all up, and then we'll mix it up and where we've got the meringue in there. What's your initial reactions of this?
It's very citrusy.
Refreshing.
And that's one of the things that they're wanting to do as far as that palate cleanser aspect.
That's what it's doing. Yeah. Yeah, I can see that breaking it up, you know, after the first couple hors d'oeuvres and the first couple, you know, maybe a soup layer or something like that. But now you're getting ready to continue, and this cleans you.
Right.
Yep.
Ready for that meat course that's coming next. And to me, this is, if you've never had it before, it's really simple to make. There's a bunch of different ways that you can make it. In our neck of the woods here, we call it a citrus shrub, which is basically fruit juice with sugar. Oftentimes it'll be like lemons, limes, and oranges. It might not be all 3 of those. Sometimes grapefruits can be put in. And then rum. This is very reminiscent of what I'm going to call the Fort Union shrub that we're used to enjoying at the different events that we've got here.
Or, yeah, very, very shrub-like the use of rum and citrus. You know, Great Lakes fur trade. You see a lot of those historic references to shrub.
So now we'll mix it together. And as far as the history of this goes, we see where this Roman punch has been around for a long time. What was the meringue one of the last things that gets added to it? Was it being used back, you know, during the late 1700s or whatever? I'm not quite sure.
It's really changing the color.
It does. Makes it more opaque. So let's try that now and see what you think.
I like it a lot better with that stirred in there. It cuts that really sour acidity a little bit, you know. It
Mutes it down a little bit.
Yeah,
Much so.
yeah, quite a bit. It's bringing it more to like that. It's it's creamier. It creams it up a little bit. You know, it's almost taking it to like a cream drink, like a White Russian or something like that. You know,
it's very
it's-
White Russian-y.
yeah, it's
Minus the fact that it's champagne and Jamaican rum versus vodka that's in there.
It's much smoother. You know,
Yeah.
there's no sourness to it anymore. It's just, you can see it's that palate cleanser again, that you're ready now to eat something heavy after it.
Right. I think the egg white that's in there, you know, when we did the episode on the improved whiskey sour, where the egg white goes in there, where we dry shake that, and then we put in everything else and mix it up, it cuts through the whiskey or the bourbon that you're using in making that whiskey sour. I think we're seeing that same effect of the egg white in here after you mix it up.
you know, you got that astringent sour like a margarita over the rocks. You know,
Yeah.
you know, and now you're getting into that creamier, fuller flavor. Once again, I'm using that comparison to like a White Russian, but like it totally changed the drink.
Yeah.
Amazing how much it totally changed the drink. And when that transition happened, when they started adding the meringue, because I was questioning what's this meringue?
Right.
What's the
Right.
meringue gonna do? I'm thinking lemon meringue pie.
Right?
And it really changes it in a great way. I mean, that's
And it's not necessarily overly sweet. It's not sickeningly sweet or anything like that. But it mutes down and not that those tones of the Jamaican rum and the champagne are overpowering or cutting or anything like that. But that alcohol vibe that's in there does get muted down and smoothened out as a result of it. So again, this is straight from the research that was done. This is a drink that you could have enjoyed as part of your evening while you're at one of these nicer places. Whether you're enjoying that buffalo tongue as an appetizer or an hors d'oeuvre, or you're enjoying it as one of the main meat courses, the Roman punch is what you'd be able to enjoy in the middle of that. And then later on, it becomes a bit passe, and that's what the common folks enjoy. So that means all of us can enjoy that today, which is really nice. So there's our Roman punch right there from 1879. So thank you again for joining us tonight. Hope that you were able to enjoy this episode with friends, and would encourage you to do so because, well, it's always better when we can history together. So I'm Leif Halverson,
And Lisa Sandin?
I'm Carl Koster.
and we look forward to the next time that we can all enjoy drinking through history.